we had the lovely Diane Chalk from Hillross Ferry Meadow. Diane's financial planning business specialises in aged care advice and experiences daily what decisions people are faced with as they age. She is the person to talk to as she is up to date with all the latest information and constant changes in the aged care arena. So could you please help me in welcoming Diane to the stand? Thanks.
Thanks, Joanne. Oh, it is, aged care advice is not straightforward, as you may or may not know. So today is really just to give you a bit of a, I suppose, a prelude into what's involved in the aged care space, or planning, because most people don't plan. It's usually an event or a crisis that causes people to have to, well, I suppose, panic and be, you know, very unprepared in going into that space. So it's really important about, you know, looking at what the cost is, what's involved, getting, you know, the family behind you, because it's very much a family. Well, if you've got family, that's always important to help support the process as well. So it's we have an ageing population, in case you haven't noticed. It's growing by the day. So in most cases, people over 65 will require care. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And as said, no one plans for it. So the chances of needing care for females is 68%. Also, the chance of males is about 48%. So we've gone from an increase since 2010 of about 0.4 million people wanting to go into care, and it's predicted to be 1.8 million by 2050. So it's coming. So if you, and the other problem is that there's less, people are living longer, but there's fewer informal carers. So that's in itself is going to be an issue going forward. So about 25% at the moment are in residential care. Some people are living in independent living and also retirement and self-units. So to go into residential care, you need an aged care assessment, which is done by the ACAT team, and also with the new home care packages, you need an assessment as well. So there's 4 levels of those, and there's also respite, which you also need you know, something for as well. So there's also Commonwealth home support schemes that people can use if they want to be at home. They're usually done through the local community. So, you know, there's various degrees of care, but said the least amount is in aged care at the moment is about 25% of the population. So some of the home care packages will help with, you know, staying at home for personal care, transport, housework, meal preparation, gardening. So there are services that are available, and they're usually done through either your local provider or local community centres. I'm not going to go into, this is another talk in itself about, you know, staying at home, but there is, just be aware there is a lot of support. Although I'm finding out more and more the packages that you get doesn't necessarily equate to the value that you get for the care. And you also have to pay for a portion of it as well. So for full pensioners, the cost per day works out about $10 a day. Whether that doesn't also equate to the amount of care that you get. So if people show up to care, it's not on the per day that they show up, it's actually every day. If you're on a part pension, there's a formula, but it more or less that you have to pay part of the subsidies that the government hands out to the providers or the facilities. And you also need an aged care assessment for that one as well. So based on the 4 levels, it depends on how much money that your package is going to provide the care that you might need. When going through the assessment for aged care, you do need an aged care assessment team. You also need to look at accredited services and the subsidy that the residential care that you might be looking at. It's always important when you're looking for a facility to provide the care that they are accredited, So if you're going to pay over, hundreds of thousands of dollars, you want to make sure that you're dealing with the right people and that you're going to get your money back should you leave or pass away. So choosing the right service, that's always important. It's, where they are, where the location, the type of amenities that they provide, what it costs, so the accommodation payment, and and can you afford it, and how do you structure your assets to pay for it, which is always a big one. So most people, that I see, the only asset they have is their home. So it's really making that decision whether you keep your home or you rent it, or you pay the interest or the daily accommodation payments. So residential care is extremely expensive, so particularly in the last couple of years. So the cost is $107,000 per year in most cases, but most of that's covered by the government. So if you think you're paying a lot of fees when you go into care, the government's very much subsidising the majority of it. So the minimum payment is about $17,900, which is about $49.07 a day, and up to a maximum of about $44,000 a year. So yeah, it's not for the faint-hearted. So if you haven't got the means, then the minimum you'll have to pay is that $49 a day, which is 85% of the full single pension. Things that you will pay, there's an accommodation payment. That's, every facility should publicise what or on the government website, they should publicise what the lump sum is, or you can choose to pay that as a daily accommodation payment, which in other words is the interest. And the interest at the moment is 5.73%. So you have the option to be able to pay that as a lump sum, or as a daily payment, or a combination of both. Everyone pays the basic fee, which is said $49.07 a day. The unknown one is the means tested fee, and that's based on your means. So it's based on a portion of your home. It's based on what you pay for your accommodation deposit. It's also based on your income and other assets, and the income also includes your pension. So it's means tested, and that's your portion that the government expects you to pay towards your care. And that's capped every year at $26,000 and a lifetime cap of about $63,000. So once you reach your caps, then you're no longer expected to pay that means tested fee per day. And some facilities offer extra service. They have to be accredited for that. That just means they might have an extra service room that might be a bit bigger, they might offer wine, they might offer a newspaper every day. In Sydney, I've seen them up to $90 to $100 a day extra. That's on top of all your other fees. There's only a few facilities in the Illawarra that charge that, and they vary from about $20 a day to about $10. So that's just it pays for luxuries. It doesn't give you extra care, it's extra service. Once you go into care, from the day you enter full-time care, that's not respite. You're expected to you're not expected to sign the agreement, but within 28 days you are. You have to let the facility know how you choose to pay for your accommodation. So whether you're going to be paying a lump sum, a daily fee, or a combination of both. So really it's just, gives you time to work out your financial situation, probably see somebody to make sure that you're making the most of it. But once you sign that agreement, there's no going back unless you leave that facility. So you agree to, and in most cases, while the family's getting things sorted, usually you just tick the daily accommodation payment or pay the interest until such time as perhaps your financial situation changes. Maybe you sell your house and you've got the funds. And in most cases, the facilities are prepared to defer the interest for that or the daily accommodation payment for up to 6 months while you're organising your payments. So So the good news is with the changes, whilst it's a lot more expensive, there are a lot more options on how to pay for it, which is, you know, one of the things that I work with families is about, you know, minimising their fees, maximising their pensions or their income. So with the refundable, I don't know if you've heard the term RAD, but it's the refundable accommodation deposit, or the lump sum that you pay, which is advertised by the facility. Some of them might charge a bit extra for a bit of a room with a view or a bigger size room. You know, the most expensive I think I've seen in the Illawarra is about $800,000, and the cheapest, probably a shared room, would be about $200,000. Yeah, again, it's really depending on you doing your homework and having a look at, see which facility. None of them have got vacancies, so don't expect you're going to rock up and they're going to have a spare bed for you. They're fully refundable, and upon within 14 days usually of probate or you leaving, and they're government guaranteed only if they're an approved provider. So make sure if anyone's going into care that they are listed on MyGov, My Aged Care, and that they are an approved. Otherwise, the chances of you getting money back. I've seen a few cases where the government's had to pay out, but it's extremely rare. But you know, it's a good, I suppose, safety net for anybody handing over, you know, $300,000 or $400,000, and also, you know, helps preserve your estate. So it's important that. And one of the other things with people going into care, if the family want to pay, and you know the facility doesn't care where the money's coming from. If your family's prepared to pay $400,000 for your room, but just be aware that that $400,000 will go back to the estate, not to the person who gave them the $400,000. So, as I say to families, all in or no one in. So the chances of you getting your money back are pretty rare unless you're an only child. There's a lot to be said for only children, because there's no one to share the love or the burden, but there's also no one to share the estate. I've seen a few only children at the moment, and it's quite stressful for them. But then at the end of it, it's they don't have to have any sibling rivalry about who's going to get what. Now, this is the big change that happened this year, is that the family home has two different assessments, one for aged care and one for Centrelink. So aged care, the maximum value of your home that will be assessed is $162,087 at the moment, and they also assess, if you rent it, it's the net rent. Doesn't necessarily have to be market rent, but for Centrelink purposes, the house is exempt only for 2 years if the spouse isn't still living in there. So up until January that wasn't the case, but it is at the moment. So with homes now being, you know, going up in value, it's not going to be, you don't have to be a financial planner to work out in 2 years' time. The chances are, you know, there's going to be at least $500,000 worth of asset going into the asset test that might preclude a lot of people from the age pension. So the exemption is 2 years, but you know, sometimes that's it's a bit of a hard one because people get attached to their family home. But when you look at the financial situation, sometimes it's not always financially viable to keep it for too long. And also now the rent is assessed, where in the past it wasn't. So if you're renting your family home when you go into care to help pay for the fees, then the rental is assessed, the net rent is assessed for aged care fees and for Centrelink purposes. So it's really working the numbers to make sure if it's a viable transaction, because not everyone's got a spare $400,000 in petty cash that they can draw on to pay for their care. So it might be a combination of, you know, having to look at seriously about selling the house. And remember, from the day one that they go in permanently, they'll start paying interest at 5.73% on that lump sum, or the outstanding amount. Look, I've just got a little case study. I'll just sort of go through that for the purpose of time. But this is just a typical, they've got a home worth $500,000, $50,000 in the bank. You know, what we look at is look at their whole financial situation. You know, should they sell the home? Should they rent? Should they use a reverse mortgage? These days there's lots more products on the market that are designed to actually, you know, use some of the equity in your home to either pay the daily fees or to pay towards somewhere towards that lump sum. And we can use things like, you know, cash flow is a big issue, particularly with couples. So it's, you know, how we're going to fund the cost of your care. And, you know, using things like rental, investments, annuities, and also optimising your financial position. And the other big thing, and Diana will talk about it in a while, is about your estate planning issues. I can't tell you how, you know, I can't stress on you enough to have all that stuff in order, because when you're dealing with aged care, you need to have powers of attorney and enduring guardianships. And it's, you know, dealing with them, dealing with, you know, other people. If you've lost capacity, you absolutely need somebody to step up and make those decisions on your behalf. Don't see it very, very often, but, you know, for us it's mandatory. Every client of ours has to have their estate planning in order. Unfortunately, you do see people, the older generation, that, you know, they don't want to do that because, you know, you're going to control my assets or you're going to put me in a home. But the problem is, when you do lose capacity, no one can make decisions other than the court giving you, and I'm sure the people from Foyle Legal will explain that in a bit much better than me, but all I know is I don't want to be on the other end of having to deal with the protective office or the guardianship board. With Madge, this is just an example, if she sells her home, there's a net cash flow of $3,000. If she decides to rent her home, there's still going to be a shortfall, so you would have to manage on how she was going to pay for that. Things that she could do, she needs to look at her estate planning issues. If she's moving into care, who are the beneficiaries, making sure that, you know, she perhaps needs to review her will if she's still capable of doing that. You know, looking at the expected capital growth. Again, there's more considerations in keeping the home or not. So, you know, there's lots of people get very attached to their home, and sometimes, you know, you need to give them some time to work it out for themselves. That, you know, or you just show them the numbers, and sometimes that scares them enough. And if they haven't got any other assets, really, that's the only choice. Yeah, so, and the ability to generate cash flow, and even if they do have a home and they rent it, you know, you still got to provide. I mean, those fees can be quite extraordinary. I just did one this morning. It was $150 a day, and the only asset they had was the house. So, you know, they're not going to, and that doesn't count, you know, probably their hairdressing, their coffee, medication, telephone, or whatever else. And I usually factor in about $100 a week for that. So, you know, not too many people can afford $150 a day, and the rent's not going to be enough to cover it either. So yeah, it's just looking at the various options. What we need to look at, you know, do they pay a lump sum? Do they pay a daily accommodation payment? And what sort of combination, if that's the case? Sell or keep the family home, and Joanne will go through, you know, what to do about preparing your home. Look, some people, and I had one today, they've been in their house for 70 years. It's like, it's not going to be sold in 5 minutes. And it's not going to be, you know, it could be 6 months before it's ready to sell. And what money needs to be spent to get it ready for sale or rent. So there's a lot of factors that you have to go through to make sure, and who's going to fund all this. Also, you know, what the financial implications are, and more importantly, what's their cash flow? How are they going to meet these expenses? And, you know, do they need to use things like reverse mortgages, or, you know, they call them care loans now, and they're only available for people going into care. Annuities, there are annuities that are available now that that can actually reduce fees and increase pensions. So if people are selling their house for much more than what the deposit costs, then potentially we can still work with those funds and make sure that, one, the estate's looked after, so there's 100% refund of whatever the investment is, and two, it can actually increase their pensions and decrease their fees. So, there's a few things we've got. Funeral bonds or prepaying funerals are great, thing to reduce assets or increase pensions, decrease fees, and also gifting. So be mindful though with gifting, there are limits, and it's pretty strict, so you can't be gifting away hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's going to be held against you for fees anyway. So, and also always about estate planning issues when you're making financial decisions. How does that impact your estate planning, your other beneficiaries, your siblings? So it's really important to, we can't be changing assets that potentially. Had one just recently, to an Italian family. So the family home was left to one son and the investment property was left to the other son. So which house do you sell? And mum's got dementia. So, you really have to look at how all this is going to impact, everybody in the picture, not just the person going into care. Look, it's all about planning, and today's all about information, about being prepared. My tips to everybody is it's going to happen, you just don't know when. Well, hopefully we all die in our sleep and it's happy days, but it doesn't work like that, unfortunately. So it's just a matter of looking at how your family is behaving, and usually from about Melbourne Cup Day through to Valentine's Day is when most people notice that grandma's not really with it. So that's when you have more contact, it seems, with your family members. So look out for things, start making, it's true.
I thought it was drinking milk.
Well, when Nana starts putting the magnums in the cupboard instead of the freezer, you think, something's, it's start looking at your elderly family and what they're doing and how they're behaving, because they get very good at covering it up, very good at it. And it's just then, for me, it's just about getting a short list of places that you think that you might like to, or your family might like to go to, because when it happens, they're going to either be in hospital or in a critical state where they have to make those decisions on the spot, on the day. So if you've got a short list of places that you think, well, I've checked them out personally, I'm not running around now when it's crisis, then that would be my biggest tip, to have a few places that you've researched yourself. Because most of them, they're open for tours. You need to look at the type of care, what the costs are, and when the time comes, at least you've done that part of it. And make sure all your important documents are somewhere safe, that somebody in the family knows where they are. And if you're decluttering, make sure everybody checks every crevice of the house. Again, can't emphasise that your estate planning is so important, and get advice early, because that optimises. You can actually start preparing for aged care or home care at a much earlier state than most people realise. So thank you for your time, and rush decisions are usually not very good decisions, as we all know. Thank you very much for your time.